Hi, everybody. I'm sorry that I only was able to upload one read aloud last week. It just got a little busy, so we'll do our best to get two going this week. Today's chapter is called Pencils. Jason borrowed a pencil from Allison. When he gave it back to her, it was full of teeth marks. Allison held the pencil by its point. "Yuck," she said. "You chewed on it." Jason felt awful. It is very embarrassing to borrow somebody's pencil and then chew on it. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't do it on purpose." "You can keep it," said Allison. She dropped the pencil on Jason's desk, then raised her hand. "Mrs. Jules, can I go to the bathroom? I have to wash my hands." Jason slobbered all over my pencil. Everybody laughed. Jason turned red. "I'm sorry, Allison," he said. "I know it's a disgusting habit. I can't help it." "Don't let Jason touch any of my books," said Allison as she headed out of the room. "He might eat them." Everybody laughed again. "Here, you can eat my book, Jason," said Todd. "I don't like it anyway." Mrs. Jules made Todd write his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Jason was so mad at himself, he broke the chewed up pencil to bits. That wasn't a smart thing to do. "Everybody take out a pencil and a piece of paper," said Mrs. Jules. "It's time for our spelling test." Jason slapped himself on the forehead. "Ugh," he thought. "Rondi, may I borrow a pencil, please?" he asked. Rondi made a face. "All my pencils are new," she said. "How do I know you won't eat it?" "I won't," said Jason. "I promise." "You better not," said Rondi. She gave him one of her pencils. It was new and freshly sharpened. Jason liked the way it smelled. "The first word is orchestra," said Mrs. Jules. Jason tried to remember how to spell orchestra. He stuck the back of the pencil in his mouth. "Second word, garbanzo." Jason chewed on the eraser. When the spelling test was over, Rondi's pencil was worse than Allison's. Jason looked at it in horror. He didn't even remember chewing it. "Oh no," he thought. "What am I going to do?" He stuck it inside his desk. "Jason, may I have my pencil back, please?" asked Rondi. "What pencil?" said Jason. "The one I lent you." Jason opened his desk and pretended to look for it. "I don't know where it is." "Mrs. Jules, Jason stole my pencil," called Rondi. "Jason, give Rondi back her pencil," said Mrs. Jules. He gave it to her. "You chewed on it!" exclaimed Rondi. Everyone laughed. "No, I didn't," said Jason. "Those are your teeth marks." "How can they be my teeth marks?" asked Rondi. She smiled. She was missing her two front teeth. "So," said Jason, "you don't chew pencils with your front teeth. You chew them with your back teeth." "How do you know?" asked Rondi. Said Jason. Mrs. Jules made Jason write his name on the board under the word discipline because he chewed Rondi's pencil, then lied about it. "And try not to eat the chalk," she said. Everyone laughed. Rondi threw the chewed up pencil out the window. It hit Lewis on the head. Mrs. Jules gave Damien a stack of worksheets and asked him to pass them out. They contained arithmetic problems. Jason had to borrow another pencil. "Allison, may I borrow another pencil, please?" he asked. "Eat my socks," said Allison. That wasn't such a bad idea, Jason realized. If he stuffed a sock in his mouth, he wouldn't be able to chew a pencil. Myron looked at his worksheet. "I don't feel like doing this stuff," he said. "Here, Jason, you can have my pencil." "Thanks, Myron," said Jason. "I promise not to chew it." He hoped he'd be able to keep his promise. He thought about asking Mrs. Jules for a Tootsie Roll Pop. If I'm sucking on that, I won't chew Myron's pencil. And a Tootsie Roll Pop would probably taste better than Allison's socks. He didn't know for sure because he had never tasted Allison's socks. But before he could ask Mrs. Jules called on him. "Jason, will you come here for a moment?" she said. "I think I know how to keep you from chewing pencils." Jason smiled as he walked to her desk. "I like the purple ones," he told her. But Mrs. Jules didn't give him a Tootsie Roll Pop. Instead, she taped his mouth shut with big, heavy-duty masking tape. She had to use a lot of tape because Jason had the second biggest mouth in the class. "There," she said. Jason started back to his seat. "Aren't you even going to say thank you?" asked Mrs. Jules. Said Jason. "You're welcome," said Mrs. Jules. "Hey, Jason," teased Allison, "you look like a mummy." "Don't sneeze," said Rondi. "You'll blow your head off." They both laughed. Jason said back to them. It was a very bad thing to say. He wasn't supposed to use words like that. "You better not pull the tape off," said Rondi. "You might rip off your lips." They both laughed again. Jason had never been more embarrassed in his whole life. His ears burned as he set to work on the arithmetic problems. They were tough problems. Several times the pencil crashed against the tape, but the tape held firm. Mrs. Jules was very proud of herself. Not only did the tape protect Myron's pencil, but Mrs. Jules also noticed that Jason was quieter than he'd ever been. I should tape all the students' mouths shut, she thought. Then they'd all be so nice and quiet. It was such a good idea. She wondered why no other teacher had ever thought of it. I don't know about that. Taping everybody's mouth shut. All right, chapter 13. A giggle box, a leaky faucet, and a foghorn. Every day after lunch, Mrs. Jules read a story to the class. Dana hated stories. The last book Mrs. Jules had read was a story about a pig and a spider. The pig was real cute and the spider was very wise. Dana thought it was a horrible book. It made her laugh too much. Everyone else laughed too. But the problem was that Dana always kept laughing long after everyone else in the class had stopped. It was very embarrassing. And sometimes she broke out laughing at a part that wasn't even funny because she remembered something funny that had happened earlier. John called her a giggle box. That only made her laugh harder. Once she broke up laughing in the middle of an arithmetic test because she remembered something funny the pig had said. Can you figure out which book they had been reading? There goes the giggle box, said John. She hated John. But that wasn't the worst part of the book. In the end, the spider died. Dana couldn't stop crying, and she thought it was so silly too, because in real life she didn't even like spiders. She squashed them all the time. John called her a leaky faucet. Somebody better call a plumber to fix the leaky faucet, he said. She laughed through her tears. Once in music, they had learned a song about a dragon. When the song begins, the dragon is very brave, but then he loses his only friend, so he isn't brave anymore. He just goes back to his cave where he is sad and lonely for the rest of his life. The song always made Dana cry. Every recess, John and Joe would chase after her singing it. She'd run across the playground with her hands over her ears and tears streaming down her face. The bell rang. Lunch was over. Dana nervously walked up the stairs to Mrs. Jules' room. Mrs. Jules would start a new book today, and she hoped it would be funny or sad. She hoped Mrs. Jules would, I misread that. She hoped it wouldn't be funny or sad. She hoped Mrs. Jules would read a boring story with no jokes. When she got to class, John and Joe were standing by her desk waiting for her. Happy birthday, Dana, said John. He was holding a present. It was wrapped in green paper and had a pink bow. But it's not my birthday, said Dana. Well, that's okay, said John. You can have it anyway, since I'm always teasing you. He and Joe snickered. Dana eagerly tore off the wrapping paper. Maybe John wasn't so bad after all, she thought. It was a box of tissues. John and Joe laughed hysterically. That's not funny, said Dana. She raised her fist and started to chase after them. Mrs. Jules rang her cowbell, and all the children settled quietly into their seats. We are ready to begin a new story, said Mrs. Jules. She held up the book. It's called Stinky. Dana laughed at the title, then quickly covered her mouth. It's about a cute and playful skunk, said Mrs. Jules. Oh, no, gasped Dana. She knew animal stories always made her cry. The animal's mother would get shot by human hunters, or else humans would build a shopping center and destroy the animal's home. She hated humans, but she knew that was silly because she was a human, and so were all of her friends. The only human she really hated was John, and she didn't think he was even human. Mrs. Jules read, It was such a beautiful day. Stinky and his mother went for a walk across the forest. Hi, Stinky, said Charlie the chipmunk. Hi, Charlie, said Stinky. Come along, Stinky, called his mother. Stinky hurried after her. They came to a road. Suddenly, Stinky heard a noise he had never heard before. It was very loud, like thunder. A car, driven by humans, was speeding toward him. Look out, shouted his mother. Stinky stopped in the middle of the road and stared at the onrushing car. He had never seen a car before. His mother pushed him out of the way just in time. He was safe, but unfortunately the car ran over his mother. Mama, Mama, he sobbed over and over again, but his mother didn't answer. She was dead. That is a very sad story. Can you imagine if I read a story like that in our class? Oh my gosh. Dana cried. Uh-oh, there goes the leaky faucet, said John, and he and Joe laughed. Dana sniffled and wiped her eyes, but the tears wouldn't stop. She just kept thinking about poor Stinky. What would he do without his mother? She wondered. Maybe he could go live with Charlie the Chipmunk, she hoped. She pulled a tissue out of the box John had given her and loudly blew her nose. There goes the foghorn, said John. Dana laughed into her tissue. She blew her nose again, even louder. It must be a very foggy day, said John. The next day, after lunch, Dana hurried up the 30 flights of stairs before the bell rang so she could talk to Mrs. Jules before class started. Yes, Dana, said Mrs. Jules. Can I leave the room when you read today? Asked Dana. Why? Asked Mrs. Jules. Because I hate stories, said Dana. They make me laugh and cry too much. You don't hate stories, Dana, Mrs. Jules told her. You love stories. I wish everybody laughed and cried as much as you. Really? Asked Dana. She couldn't believe it. All this time she thought she hated stories when really she loved them. She was glad she really loved stories. Suddenly she made a face. Oh, yuck, she said. What is it? Asked Mrs. Jules. What if I really loved John, too? Get it? When she's discovering things she thought she hated, she actually loves. It's funny. Okay, hope you enjoyed these 2 chapters, and I'll see you soon for another 2. Bye, guys.